A single gunshot cracks over Widow's Bend, and every lantern in the yard goes still. It comes not from a duel, not from rustlers in the dark, but from inside the barn where 30 guests had gathered an hour before to celebrate a homecoming. By the time the smoke clears, one man will be on his knees in the dirt, one woman will be holding a rifle. She has never fired before tonight, and a secret buried for 6 years will finally answer for itself. This story starts 3 weeks before that shot is ever fired. It starts with a stagecoach, a satchel, and a young woman who has no idea that coming home will be the most dangerous decision of her life. Josephine Hartwell steps down from the stagecoach with dust already settling into the hem of her traveling dress, and the first thing she notices is how many men are watching her do it. For years away has changed the shape of Widow's Bend in her memory, smaller streets, fewer buildings, a town that once felt endless to a girl of 18 now fits inside a single glance. What hasn't changed is the way the men outside the mercantile straighten their hats when she passes, the way conversation stops and starts again, a half-tone too polite. She is not fooled by any of it. For years of finishing school taught her needlework and French, but the ranch taught her something more useful first. Men are loudest right before they want something. Her father meets her at the gate with his arms open and his eyes wet, and for a moment she is simply glad to see him, glad to smell hay and wood smoke instead of city coal. Franklin Hartwell has aged more than 4 years. His hands shake with the stagecoach. Driver lingers half a second too long, as if he is counting the cost of it. That evening, the ranch throws her a welcome supper in the yard between the bunkhouse and the barn, string lanterns strung low, a fiddle tuning up by the water trough. Josie recognizes the arrangement for what it is before she has finished her first 2. Every cowboy wanted her. She chose the one nobody noticed. Cup of cider a parade. Every unmarried man on the Hartwell payroll and half the ranches within 20 miles has found a reason to attend, and every one of them approaches her with the same rehearsed warmth, the same careful mention of how well the ranch could do with a strong partnership behind it. Reese Calloway does not wait his turn. He crosses the yard like a man who already owns the ground he is walking on, takes her hand before she offers it, and tells her the ranch has not looked this fine since her mother ran it. It is, Josie thinks, a well-built compliment, flattering to her, flattering to himself for saying it, and utterly empty underneath. His men laugh at everything he says a half-second before it is funny. It is while Calloway is still holding court that she notices the man standing near the corral fence, apart from the crowd, arms loose at his sides, watching the tree line instead of the party. He is not drinking. He is not laughing at Calloway's jokes. When a horse startles at the fiddle music, he is already moving toward it before anyone else registers the sound, one calm hand on its neck, murmuring something only the animal can hear. She asks her father who he is. Franklin glances over, distracted, and says only, Colby. Good with the fences. Keeps to himself, in the tone of a man describing furniture. Josie watches Nathaniel Colby settle the horse and step back into the shadows at the fence line, and something in her recognizes an old truth from her mother's ledgers, the men who work don't have time to perform. When the fiddle finally strikes up a proper tune and Calloway steps forward, loud enough for the whole yard to hear, and announces that he will have the first dance with the guest of honor, Josie feels every eye in the yard swing toward her at once. She does not answer Calloway. She crosses the yard instead, past the men who came to be noticed, and stops in front of the one who didn't come to be noticed at all. Mr. Colby, she says. I don't believe we've been introduced. 3. Every cowboy wanted her. She chose the one nobody noticed. For one long breath, Nathaniel Colby looks at her the way a man looks at a fence line he has just discovered is on fire, surprised, calculating, already 3 steps ahead in his Mine toward whatever comes next. Then he takes off his hat. Nate, he says. Just Nate. Behind her, the yard has gone quiet enough to hear the fiddle player forget his own tune. Reeves Calloway's smile does not move, but something behind his eyes goes very still. And Franklin Hartwell sets down his cider without drinking it. Nobody in that yard understands yet what Josie has just done. She has not simply embarrassed a foreman in front of his men. She has, without knowing it, pulled a thread that 6 years ago was tied off and buried, and the whole fabric of Widow's Bend is about to come undone with it. Greetings, gentle viewers, and welcome back to the ranch. Before the story rides any further, if this is your first evening with us, consider joining the family here. There's a whole shelf of these tales waiting for you, and more coming every week. Chapter 1, The Homecoming and the Silent Man. The morning after the party, Josie wakes before the household and walks the property. Alone, the way she used to as a girl. The ranch is smaller than her memory too, but it is honestly smaller, fences sagging in places her father would never have allowed 6 years ago, a section of the north pasture gone fallow, cattle counted in the ledgers that she cannot find grazing anywhere she looks. She finds Nate Colby already at the north fence, replacing a rotted post with the patient rhythm of a man who has done the same motion 10,000 times and stopped resenting it long ago. You're up early, he says, not looking up. So are you. 4. Every cowboy wanted her? She chose the one nobody noticed. Fences don't fix themselves. She watches him work for a while before she asks the question that has been sitting in her all morning. Why weren't you at the party longer? He drives the post the rest of the way down before he answers. Wasn't my party. It was mine. I invited whoever I wanted there. You didn't invite anybody. Your father did. He finally looks at her, and there's no unkindness in it, just plain fact laid out the way he lays fence rail. I don't dance much. Miss Hartwell. Didn't want to waste your evening finding that out. It is, she realizes, the first honest sentence anyone has said to her since she stepped off the stagecoach. Over the following days, Josie makes it her business to walk the ranch the way her mother once had, ledger in hand, questions for every hand she passes. She learns the truth in pieces. The herd is down almost a third from what the books from 4 years ago show. 2 water rights disputes with neighboring land are unresolved. Calloway handles the buyers now, not her father, and the prices he brings home never quite match what Josie remembers cattle fetching even in a bad year. When she raises it with her father, Franklin waves a hand heavy with rings he didn't used to wear. Calloway's kept this place standing while you were away playing piano in St. Louis, he says, sharper than she has ever heard him. You'll forgive me if I trust the man who stayed. The rebuke stings, but it does not convince her. She has always trusted numbers over tempers, and the numbers do not add up. She finds herself, 3 more mornings running, at the north fence with Nate. He does not fill silences the way other men do, and does not perform concern or curiosity to keep her talking. When she mentions the missing cattle count, he simply nods once, as if he has already noticed and simply hadn't been asked. You've seen it too, she says. 5. Every cowboy wanted her? She chose the one nobody noticed. Not my place to say. I'm asking you to say it anyway. He studies her for a long moment, the kind of look that weighs whether a person can be trusted with a true answer instead of a comfortable one. Calloway drives more head to market than comes back paid for. I've seen the tally sheets. Nobody checks his math but him. It is the longest sentence she has heard him say, and it costs him something to say. She can see that in the careful, flat way he delivers it, like a man setting down a weight he has carried alone too long. That evening, Calloway finds her on the porch and leans against the rail with the easy confidence of a man who has never once doubted his own welcome. "Heard you've been out at the north fence a lot," he says. "Talking to Colby." "I talk to whoever's working the land I'll inherit." "Careful who you spend your mornings with, Miss Hartwell. A man like that keeps to himself for a reason. Folks who keep secrets usually have one worth keeping." She holds his gaze without flinching. "Funny. I was about to say the same thing about you." Calloway's smile widens, but it is not warm. "You've got your mother's mouth," he says. And there is something underneath the compliment that does not sound like a compliment at all. He tips his hat and walks off into the dark, and Josie stands alone on the porch a long while after, turning his words over like a coin that might be counterfeit. She does not yet know how right she is. Chapter 2, A War Without Bullets. 6. Every cowboy wanted her? She chose the one nobody noticed. Calloway does not confront Nate directly. He is smarter than that. Within a week, Nate finds himself assigned the ranch's worst work, the far pastures with the least shade, the mending jobs that take a man 2 days alone when they should take 4 men 1. Afternoon, the night watches that leave him hollow-eyed by breakfast. Josie notices. She says nothing about it to her father, who would only side with his foreman, and instead does something that sets the whole ranch talking. She starts riding out to the far pastures herself, ledger and canteen strapped to her saddle, and works alongside Nate instead of simply visiting him. "You don't have to do this," he tells her the first afternoon, handing her a fence stretcher. She clearly does not know how to use correctly. "I know I don't have to. Calloway's punishing me." "If you're out here too, he'll say you're choosing sides." "I already chose a side," she says, and hands the stretcher back to get his correction on her grip. "I chose the side that tells me the truth." Over the following weeks, something changes between them that neither is in a hurry to name. It is built less on words than on the shared rhythm of work, Nate teaching her to read cattle brands at a glance, Josie teaching him the finer mathematics of the ledgers so he can help her spot where the numbers bend wrong. They talk about small things at first, her years in St. Louis, the horse he broke as a boy, the taste of her mother's cornbread, which Josie remembers, and Nate, it turns out, has eaten more recently than she has, since the ranch cook still makes it every Sunday. It is easy, unhurried, and entirely unlike anything Calloway or his crowd of suitors have offered her. Nobody performs for anybody out at the far fence line. There is simply work, and honesty, and the slow unfolding of two people who have both learned to be careful with what they say out loud. But Nate carries something Josie can feel even when she cannot name it, a watchfulness that never fully rests, even in the quietest moments. He startles at sounds other men wouldn't notice. He always sits with his back to a wall. Once, when a wagon backfires on 7. Every cowboy wanted her? She chose the one nobody noticed. The road below the ridge, she sees his hand move to his hip before his mind catches up to tell him there is no threat. "What happened to you?" she asks him one evening, as the sun goes down orange over the pasture. "Nothing happened to me," he says, too quickly, and then, softer, "not the kind of thing I can put into a Sunday conversation, Miss Hartwell." "Josie," she corrects him, not for the first time. "Josie." He tries the name like it might not be allowed to him yet. Some things a man carries for so long, saying them out loud feels like putting them back on somebody else's shoulders. "I don't want to put mine on yours. Maybe I'm stronger than you think." He looks at her then with something that is not quite a smile and not quite grief. "I don't doubt your strength. I doubt whether the truth is safe for you to carry yet." She does not push further that night. But the answer, half given and half withheld, settles into her the way a splinter settles under skin, small and certain to work its way to the surface eventually. Meanwhile, Calloway's patience with the arrangement is visibly thinning. He begins finding reasons to summon Josie away from the fence line on ranch business that could easily wait. He mentions, more than once and always lightly, that a woman of her position ought to be more careful about where she spends her reputation. And twice now, Franklin Hartwell has asked his daughter, in a voice that sounds almost afraid, whether she has considered that some men aren't worth the trouble they cause a family. Josie begins to understand that the trouble is not Nate Colby at all. The trouble is whatever her father owes, and whoever is collecting it. 8. Every cowboy wanted her? She chose the one nobody noticed. Hey, quick question before we ride into the next chapter. Where in the world are you watching this from tonight? I'd love to say hello. Drop your town or country down in the comments, and I'll be reading through them. Chapter 3, Cracks in the Herd. The accidents begin in the 3rd week. First, the prized breeding bull is found sick in the pen, foam at its mouth, and the ranch's old hand Ezra Doyle swears on his mother's grave that the feed was clean the night before. The animal survives, barely, but the vet from town cannot explain the sickness and will not put his name to a guess. Then the north well pump seizes overnight, and when Nate strips it down to find the cause, he pulls out a fistful of gravel packed too evenly to have gotten there by accident. Josie brings both findings to her father, laid out plainly across his desk the way she would present a ledger discrepancy. Franklin listens with his jaw tight and his hands folded, and when she finishes, he tells her she is imagining conspiracies where there is only bad luck and an old ranch falling apart from neglect. Reeves has been loyal to this family for 6 years, he says. I won't have you accusing him on the word of a hired hand. I'm not accusing him of Nate's words. I'm accusing him of the evidence in front of you. The evidence is a sick bull and a broken pump. Ranches have both every season. She leaves his study more frustrated than she has been since she arrived, and finds Nate waiting by the barn, having guessed correctly how the conversation would go. He won't hear it, she says. Men don't hear what costs them something to believe, Nate answers. Your father's not stupid, Josie. He's scared. There's a difference, and it usually looks the same from the outside. 9. Every cowboy wanted her? She chose the one nobody noticed. It is at the well pump, cleaning the gravel from his hands, that Nate still goes in a way Josie has learned to read as significant. He turns over one of the small stones and holds it to the light, not a stone at all, but a spent shell casing, its base stamped with a maker's mark that most men would never look twice at. Josie watches the color leave his face. Nate. It's nothing, he says, and the lie sits so badly on him that she knows immediately it is the opposite of nothing. He pockets the casing before she can look closer, and for the rest of that day he is somewhere else entirely, present in body and absent everywhere it matters. That night, for the first time since she has known him, Nate Colby misses supper, and when she finds him afterward sitting alone at the edge of the corral, staring at nothing, she sits beside him without a word and waits. I need to tell you something, he finally says. And I need you to understand that I should have told you the first week you started walking out to that fence with me. Tell me. He turns the shell casing over in his fingers, the metal catching moonlight. This mark. I've seen it before. 6 years ago, on a ranch 200 miles north of here, on the ground where my whole family died in one night, and I was the only one left standing to bury them. The words land in the quiet air between them like a stone dropped into still water, rings spreading outward, and Josie understands, without yet knowing the shape of it, that everything she thought she knew about the man beside her and the man running her Father's ranch has just changed completely. Chapter 4, The Mask Behind the Smile. 10. Every cowboy wanted her? She chose the one nobody noticed. Nate does not finish the story that night. He asks for time, and Josie, though every instinct in her wants the whole truth immediately, gives it to him, because she has learned enough of him by now to know that pushing will only close the door she has spent weeks prying open. She does not have to wait long for the next piece of the puzzle to arrive on its own. 3 days later, riding back from town alone, Josie is intercepted on the road by Cowboy, who steers his horse across her path with a friendliness so deliberate it feels like a hand closing around her wrist. "Been meaning to catch you without an audience," he says. "Then you should have asked." "I'm asking now." He smiles the way he always smiles, but this time there is nothing behind it worth returning. "Your father's in trouble, Miss Hartwell. Deeper trouble than he's told you, deeper than he'd want me telling you either, except somebody's got to be honest around here, and it looks like it's going to be me." "What kind of trouble?" "The kind that gets settled by marriage, usually, in families that want to keep their land, instead of losing it to men who don't care how they take it." He lets that sit. "I've made your father an offer. A generous one. Marry me, and the debt gets handled quietly, and the ranch stays a Hartwell ranch, more or less. Refuse, and I promise you, the people your father owes don't have my patience." Josie feels something cold settle into her chest that has nothing to do with the autumn wind. "You're threatening me." "I'm informing you." His voice drops, and for the first time since she has met him, the charm falls away entirely, revealing something flatter and colder underneath. "You've got 1 month to decide sensibly, before the men behind me decide for you. And Miss Hartwell, that hired hand you've taken such a shine to. He'd do well to remember that, eh?" 11. Every cowboy wanted her? She chose the one nobody noticed. Man with no name to protect is a man with nothing to lose, and men with nothing to lose have a way of disappearing quietly, out here, where nobody comes looking. He tips his hat, exactly as he did that first night on the porch, and rides on, leaving her alone on the road with her heart hammering and her hands, she notices only now, shaking on the reins. She does not go home directly. She rides to the north fence instead, finds Nate mending the same stretch of rail he has mended twice already this month, and tells him everything. Calloway's offer, his threat, the month-long deadline hanging over her father like a blade on a fraying rope. Nate's face, usually so carefully still, goes hard in a way she has not seen before. "He knows," Nate says quietly. "About Redwater Creek. He knows who I am." Redwater Creek. The ranch where my family died. He sets down his tools with deliberate care, the way a man sets down something he might otherwise throw. Calloway was there, Josie. 6 years ago, he wasn't a foreman looking for honest work. He was scouting the layout for the men who came in the night and burned it to the ground. I didn't recognize him at first. A man changes his beard, his manner, his name maybe. But I've seen him ride a horse. I've seen the way he sits a saddle low on the left side from an old injury. I know that seat. I watched it from a hayloft while I was too young and too scared to do anything but watch. The autumn wind moves through the pasture grass, and for a long moment neither of them speaks. "Why didn't you tell someone?" Josie asks. "The sheriff." Sheriff Bird's on somebody's payroll, and it isn't mine. Nate's jaw tightens. I've spent 6 years watching, waiting for proof solid enough that a court wouldn't laugh it out of the room, and a coward like Bird couldn't bury it. I came to this ranch because I heard. 12. Every cowboy wanted her? She chose the one nobody noticed. Rumors this same crew of men were circling new land, and I wanted to be close enough to stop it before another family loses what mine lost. That's why you never left. Why you never made friends here, never let anyone close. Getting close to people is how you lose them. He looks at her then, and something in his careful composure finally breaks open, just at the edges. I broke my own rule with you. I don't regret it. But I need you to understand what it means now that Calloway's put a deadline on your father and a target on my back in the same breath. It means we don't have a month, Josie says. It means we don't have any time at all. Chapter 5, Ghosts of the Panhandle. That night, in the quiet of the tack room, away from the house and its listening walls, Nate finally tells her the whole of it. He was 25, working his family's modest spread near Redwater Creek with his father, his 2 younger sisters, and a mother who kept the best kitchen garden in 3 counties. They were not wealthy, but the water rights on their land were valuable. Enough to draw the wrong kind of attention from a syndicate out of the Eastern Rail towns, men who had made a business of acquiring land through any means that worked. Force chief among them. The raid came at night, disguised as rustlers, though Nate had recognized even then that no ordinary rustler burns a house with a family still inside it. He survived only because he had been sleeping in the barn loft after an argument with his father, a small, foolish, teenage kind of quarrel that he has spent 6 years being grateful for and ashamed of in equal measure. He watched from the loft, unable to move, unable to help, while men he did not yet know by name murdered his family and salted the well so the land would be worthless to anyone who tried to claim it after. He buried what he could find of them himself. 13. Every cowboy wanted her. She chose the one nobody noticed. Days later, once the men were gone and his hands had stopped shaking enough to hold a shovel, he changed his name from Nathaniel Ward to Nathaniel Colby the following spring, and has spent every year since working ranches within reach of the old rail lines, watching for the crew that killed his family to surface again with a new target. I never planned on staying anywhere long enough to matter to anyone, he tells Josie, the lantern light throwing long shadows across the tack room walls. And then your father hired me 2 years ago, and I told myself I'd stay through 1 season, then 2. And somewhere in there I stopped counting, because leaving started to feel like losing something instead of protecting myself from it. Josie takes his hand, the first time either of them has touched with any real intention, and does not let go. You're not a liability, Nate. You're the only honest thing that's happened to this ranch since I stepped off that stagecoach. I'm a wanted description in 3 counties for a debt I never took and a name that isn't even mine anymore. You're a man who buried his whole family alone at 25 and still gets up every morning to fix somebody else's fences instead of burning the world down. I don't call that a liability. I call that the strongest thing I've ever seen a person do. For a long moment, he simply looks at her, as though her words are a language he has forgotten how to trust. Then he leans in, slow enough that she could stop him if she wanted to, and she does not want to. The kiss is careful at first, questioning, and then it is not careful at all. 6 years of guarded silence and 3 weeks of unspoken understanding breaking open between them at once. When they finally part, forehead still close, Nate exhales like a man setting down a weight he has carried since he was 25 years old. If Calloway's here, he says, then the men behind him aren't far. They don't send a scout somewhere and leave him unsupervised for 6 years unless the ground's worth the wait. 14. Every cowboy wanted her. She chose the one nobody noticed. Then we stop waiting too, Josie says. We found proof. Real proof, the kind bird can't bury and my father can't wave away. And we do it before that month runs out. Nate studies her, something like awe moving behind his careful eyes. You sound like a woman who's already decided how this ends. I decided the moment your foreman told me I had a month to be sensible, she says. I've never once in my life been sensible on somebody else's timeline. I don't intend to. Start now. Greetings again, gentle viewers. If Josie and Nate have earned a place in your evening, the kindest thing you can do is press that subscribe button before the next chapter begins. It costs you nothing and it keeps stories like this one alive. Chapter 6, The Debt Come Due. Finding proof against a man as careful as Calloway takes patience neither of them has much of any more, but they find an ally in an unlikely place, Ezra Doyle, the old ranch hand who first swore the bull's feed had been clean and who has quietly resented Calloway's rise from ordinary foreman to something closer to a second owner of the ranch. Ezra remembers things other men forget to notice. He remembers a night 2 months before Josie's return when Calloway rode out after midnight and came back before dawn, smelling of coal smoke, though there had been no fires reported anywhere near the ranch. He remembers a stranger in a fine coat who met with Calloway twice at the edge of the property, always at dusk, always gone before the bunkhouse woke. More useful still, Ezra remembers where Calloway keeps his private correspondence in a strong box in the foreman's cabin that Ezra has been ordered never to touch under threat of dismissal, which strikes all three of them as exactly the kind of order a guilty man gives. They wait for a night when Calloway rides to town on ranch business, and Nate picks the strong box lock with a patience Josie finds almost unsettling in a man she has only ever 15. Every cowboy wanted her. She chose the one nobody noticed. Seen handle livestock and fence rail. Inside, they find what they need and more than they wanted: letters from a land syndicate out of Kansas City, correspondence confirming payments made to Calloway for services rendered at Redwater Creek 6 years prior, unfolded separately, more recent a letter in a hand Josie recognizes instantly as her father's, promising the syndicate first right to purchase Hartwell land the moment the ranch's debts came due, in exchange for a loan that has clearly kept the ranch afloat through years Josie was away and never knew to question. She sits on the cabin floor with her father's letter in her hands, and for a long moment she cannot make her mind accept what her eyes are reading. He's not just being deceived by Calloway, she says finally, her voice hollow. He's in business with him. Nate crouches beside her, careful with his words. It doesn't mean he knew what Calloway did at Redwater Creek. It means he's been selling this ranch out from under both of us to keep himself afloat. And letting Calloway court me like a solution to a debt he never had the courage to admit. They return the letters to the strongbox exactly as they found them, careful to leave no trace, and ride back to the main house in silence heavier than either of them wants to break. Josie confronts her father the following morning, the letter's contents committed to memory since she dared not steal the original. Franklin Hartwell's face, when she lays out what she knows, does not show the shock of an innocent man wrongly accused. It shows the exhausted collapse of a man who has been waiting years for someone to finally make him say the truth out loud. I never meant for it to go this far, he says, sinking into his chair like the bones have gone out of him. A bad season, then two, then a loan that seemed reasonable at the time from men who seemed reasonable at the time. By the time I understood what kind of men they really were, I owed them more than this ranch is worth, and Calloway made 16. Every cowboy wanted her. She chose the one nobody noticed. It sounds so simple. Marry you into the arrangement, clear the debt, keep the land in the family name even if not entirely in the family's control. You were going to sell me to cover your mistakes. I was going to save what your mother spent 30 years building. His voice cracks on the last word, and for a moment he looks less like the proud man who greeted her at the gate and more like an old man who has run out of roads that do not end in ruin. I didn't Know about Redwater Creek, Josie? I swear that to you on your mother's grave. I knew. Calloway was hard, I knew he was ambitious, I never knew he was that. Then you'll help us stop him, Josie says. It is not a question. Franklin looks at his daughter for a long moment, seeing perhaps for the first time since she stepped off that stagecoach exactly who she has become in his absence, not the girl he sent away to learn needlework, but a woman entirely capable of running this ranch, this family, and this fight without waiting for his permission to do any of it. I'll help, he says quietly. It's the least I owe you both. Chapter 7, The Father's Confession. What Franklin reveals over the following days changes the shape of the danger entirely. The syndicate's plan was never simply to collect a debt. Debts can be renegotiated, delayed, absorbed into a marriage contract that keeps appearances tidy. The plan, as Franklin finally admits, was always to take the land outright the moment a legal claim could be manufactured, using the marriage as the final piece that would let the syndicate's man Calloway inherit direct control of the deed without ever having to explain to a court how he came by it. Tonight, Franklin says, his voice barely above a whisper as the three of them sit in his study with the curtains drawn. Calloway told me tonight is the night he presents the marriage papers to Josie, in front of witnesses, so the town sees it as her choice and not his demand. If she refuses in front of that many people, he's told me plainly, he won't. 17. Every cowboy wanted her? She chose the one nobody noticed. Wait for the law. He'll take the ranch by force and blame it on rustlers, the same story he's used before. Redwater Creek, Nate says quietly. Franklin nods, ashen. I didn't know the name until you said it. God help me, I didn't ask enough questions 6 years ago when the offer of easy money first came to my door. Josie feels the full weight of the trap close around her, and for the first time since this entire ordeal began, she allows herself a moment of pure fear before setting it aside in favor of the only thing that has ever served her well, a plan. Then we don't let it happen the way he's planned it, she says. We know what he's coming for. We know roughly when. That's more warning than my mother ever got. When this ranch nearly failed the first time, and she rebuilt it from less. Franklin reaches into his desk and withdraws the ranch's original deed, the ink faded. But the signature of her mother's, alongside his own, from the ranch's founding still perfectly legible. Whatever happens tonight, he says, pressing the deed into Nate's hands rather than his daughter's, a choice that surprises all three of them, get Josie somewhere safe, and get this somewhere safer. If Calloway's men take the house, they'll look for it here first. I mean to stay and stall him as long as my legs will carry me. Papa, no. I have spent years being a coward about the things that mattered, Franklin says, and there is something in his voice that Josie has not heard since she was a small girl. Watching him break a wild colt with nothing but patience and a rope. Let me be brave about one thing before the night is through. Chapter 8, Fire on Widow's Bend. Calloway arrives with the storm. 18. Every cowboy wanted her? She chose the one nobody noticed. It rolls in off the plains just after dusk, thunderhead stacking violet and black above the ranch, and by the time his riders come through the gate 6 men Josie does not recognize, hired hands with the particular blankness of men paid not to ask questions. The first fat drops of rain have already begun to hiss against the lantern glass. The confrontation begins civil enough on the surface, Calloway dismounting in the yard, with the marriage papers rolled under one arm as if this were still a courtship and not an ambush. But Franklin's refusal to produce his daughter, and Josie's own appearance on the porch with her chin high and her answer already plain on her face, curdles the pretense within minutes. You had a month, Calloway says, all charm finally stripped away, voice carrying flat and hard across the yard. I'm a generous man, Miss Hartwell, but generosity has limits. And you've just found mine. What happens next happens fast. One of Calloway's men puts a torch to the hay stacked along the bunkhouse wall, not by accident this time, not sabotage disguised as bad luck, but open and deliberate, meant to flush the loyal hands out into the open where they can be dealt with one by one. Within minutes the bunkhouse roof is a sheet of orange against the storm-black sky, and the ranch hands who have worked this land honestly for years are running for water buckets that will do nothing against a fire meant to burn hot and fast. Nate finds Josie in the chaos and pulls her toward the main barn, the deed already secured inside his coat, but Calloway's men have anticipated the move, and the barn doors are blocked before they can reach open ground beyond them. Franklin, true to his word, plants himself between Calloway and the barn entrance. The ranch's original deed papers, decoy copies Nate prepared that afternoon, held up like a shield. "You'll have to go through me," he says, and for once in his life, his voice does not shake. Calloway does not hesitate. The shot that follows is the one the whole story has been building toward, not the hook that opened this tale, not yet, but its opening note, and 19. Every cowboy wanted her. She chose the one nobody noticed. Franklin Hartwell goes down hard in the mud of his own yard, wounded through the shoulder, alive but bleeding freely into the storm. Inside the barn, Nate barricades what he can and turns to face 6 armed men with nothing but a revolver, 2 years of buried grief, and a woman he has no intention of losing the same way he lost everyone else. "Stay behind me," he tells Josie. "I don't think I will," she says, and reaches instead for the loaded rifle kept by the barn door for coyotes, her hand steadier than she expects them to be. Chapter 9, The Reckoning. The fight inside the burning barn is not the clean, choreographed thing of dime novels. It is loud, frightened, chaotic animals screaming in their stalls, smoke thickening along the rafters, men shouting over each other in the dark. Nate takes a bullet across the meat of his shoulder early, a wound that would drop most men, and keeps his feet through sheer refusal to fall. It is the shot that finally answers the story's opening hook, the crack that stills every lantern in the yard, the one that sends Ezra Doyle and the other loyal hands running from the well line with whatever weapons they can grab. Calloway finds his way to Nate through the smoke, and for the first time in 6 years, the 2 men who watched Redwater Creek burn from opposite ends of the same tragedy stand face to face with the truth finally spoken plainly between them. "You should have stayed dead in that hayloft," Calloway says, leveling his revolver. "I thought about it for a long time," Nate answers, blood soaking dark through his shirt. "Decided I'd rather be alive to see you answer for it." Calloway's finger tightens on the trigger, and it is Josie, rifle raised, hand steady despite everything, positioning herself squarely between the 2 men who changes the shape of 20. Every cowboy wanted her. She chose the one nobody noticed. The moment entirely. She does not fire at Calloway. She fires once into the barn's rafters. A warning loud enough to cut through smoke and thunder both, and levels her gaze at every man in that barn with a clarity that makes even the hired guns hesitate. "Every one of you knows what you're standing inside of," she calls out, her voice carrying over the crackle of fire and the drum of rain on the roof. A man who burned a family alive at Redwater Creek 6 years ago, and is fixing to do the same thing here tonight, to people who've done nothing but ride for this brand honestly. You can keep taking his coin, or you can remember whatever decency put you on a horse in the first place. It is not a grand speech. It does not need to be. 2 of Calloway's hired men lower their weapons first, then a third, the particular blankness in their faces cracking open into something closer to shame. Ezra Doyle and the ranch's loyal hands arrive in that same breath, outnumbering what remains of Calloway's crew, and the balance of the fight tips entirely before Calloway fully understands that it has tipped at all. He turns his rage on Nate instead, closing the distance in 3 furious strides, and the Fight that follows is brutal and short, not the clean duel of dime novels, but two men who have carried 6 years of grief and guilt slamming that weight into each other with fists and desperation until Nate, wounded and outweighed but finally free of the silence he has carried since he was 25, drives Calloway to the ground and does not let him back up. He does not kill him. Josie sees the choice cross his face clearly, the temptation, and then, deliberately, the decision against it, and understands in that moment exactly what kind of man she has chosen. Not one who ends violence with more violence, but one who has spent 6 years wanting justice, not vengeance, and knows precisely which one. He is holding Calloway down for now. Sheriff Amos Bird arrives late, as he always seems to, but the letters recovered from Calloway's strongbox retrieved that same night by Ezra on Nate's earlier instruction, and handed directly to a federal land agent traveling through town rather than to Bird. 21. Every cowboy wanted her? She chose the one nobody noticed. Himself make it impossible for even a bought lawman to look away from what the whole ranch has now witnessed firsthand. Reeves Calloway is taken into custody as the storm finally breaks over Widow's Bend. The barn still smoking behind him, the truth of Redwater Creek finally spoken aloud in front of enough witnesses that it can never again be buried. Chapter 10, Deed in Her Own Name. The weeks that follow bring their own kind of reckoning, quieter than the one in the barn but no less significant. Franklin Hartwell survives his wound, though it leaves him with a shoulder that aches before every rainstorm for the rest of his days. He testifies fully against the syndicate that trapped him, cooperation that spares him prison but not disgrace the whole territory. Soon knows how close the Hartwell ranch came to being signed away to cover a proud man's private shame. It is a hard season for him, humbling in a way for years of his daughter's absence never managed to be, and in the spring he does something Josie does not expect. He transfers the ranch's deed fully into her name, not as a wedding gift contingent on marriage, but outright, unconditional, the paperwork drawn up by a lawyer in the county seat who explains to Josie, with some surprise in his voice, that a woman holding land in her own name free of any husband's claim is rarer than it ought to be, though the law allows it plainly enough for those who know to ask. Your mother built this place with her own hands as much as mine, Franklin tells her. The papers signed and witnessed in the same study where he once confessed his debt. It should carry a Hartwell woman's name on the deed the same way it always carried her spirit in the walls. I should have done this the day you turned 21, if I'd had half her courage. Nate's shoulder heals slower than Franklin's, but heals it, and through that long recovery something settles between him and Josie that neither of them rushes to name with anything so simple as a proposal. He tells the sheriff's replacement an honest 22. Every cowboy wanted her? She chose the one nobody noticed. Young deputy sent up from the county seat after Bird's own dealings with the syndicate come to light the full truth of Redwater Creek at last, and for the first time in 6 years. Nathaniel Ward's name is spoken publicly, not as a fugitive's alias but as a survivor's testimony, entered into the record where it can finally do the good it was always meant. 2. Reeves Calloway stood trial in the county seat that autumn. The evidence recovered from his own strongbox, combined with Nate's testimony and Franklin's cooperation, leaves little room for the kind of doubt that has protected men like him before. He is sentenced to hang for his part in the Redwater Creek killings, and the syndicate that employed him, exposed at last by federal land agents Josie's evidence helps bring to Widow's Bend, finds its operations across the territory unraveling in the months that follow. On a clear morning in early spring, Josie and Nate stand together at the edge of the north pasture, the same fence line where all of this began, mended now, sturdy, the posts he set that first week holding firm against a season of storms. Your father asked me something yesterday, Nate tells her, turning a fence staple over in his fingers the way he always does when he's working up to something honest. Asked whether I intended to marry his daughter or just keep courting her at a snail's pace until we're both too old to enjoy it. And what did you tell him? Told him I intended to ask her properly, once I was certain the asking wouldn't look like a man trying to attach himself to land that was never his to begin with. He looks at her, steady the way he has always been steady, even in a burning barn with a bullet in his shoulder. This is your ranch, Josie. Your name on the deed, your mother's legacy. Your father's redemption. I never want you to wonder, one day down the road, whether I chose you or I chose what came with you. Josie steps closer, closing the distance he has left carefully open between them. I've known the difference between a man who wants me and a man who wants my name on a piece of paper since the night I crossed that yard and asked yours instead of taking 23. Every cowboy wanted her. She chose the one nobody noticed. Calloway's hand. I chose you when you had nothing to offer but honest work and a story you were too afraid to tell. I don't need you to have less than that to keep choosing you. Now, the proposal, when it finally comes, is unhurried and entirely unwitnessed except by the cattle grazing nearby and the fence posts that have held steady through everything this land has thrown at them. Josie says yes with her hand already laced through his, the ring simple, the moment simpler still, exactly the kind of quiet, honest thing that neither of them ever found in a crowded yard full of men performing for an audience. The town of Widow's Bend, which once watched a headstrong heiress choose the quiet ranch hand over its most celebrated bachelor and called it a scandal, comes in time to call it something else entirely the night the loudest men in the valley were finally seen for exactly what they were, and the quietest one was finally seen for everything he had always been. Hey, one more quick thing before you go. If this story kept you here till the very end, that's the highest compliment you can pay a storyteller, so subscribe to see how many more of these unfold, and comment below where you're watching from tonight. I would love to say hello to you, just to know how far our story is going.